6.5%, was it? Is that what the current odds are of the Stanley Cup?
Well, and if you look at the round-by-round progression, the Stanley Cup favorite is the Vancouver Canucks.
Like, what a time to be alive!
Talking you through every goalie controversy, scoring slump, and draft lottery bust, this is the C4 Podcast on CanucksHockeyBlog.com. Here they are, the best starting lineup we could afford under the salary cap. Chris, Matt, Anna, and Adam.
Welcome to another episode of the C4 Canucks Hockey Podcast, brought to you by CanucksHockeyBlog.com and the Full Press Coverage Network. I am Chris at Lightforce. A guy who is saying these same words a second time this week, joined virtually by Anna Forsyth at A46003, missing in action as he is in Banff is Matt Lee at Mattley_61, and still unfit to podcast is Adam Ovenel Carter at AdamFOC. How you doing there, Anna?
About the same as I was Monday. Pretty much, pretty similar.
Yeah, and
a little soggier.
It's wet.
I got caught out in that rainstorm earlier, so that was fun.
So to put into perspective what the weather is like in Vancouver, and for those in the Pacific Northwest, it's probably pretty similar. We had so much rain that it filled up this fountain that we have on our balcony. It was pretty much bone dry, and now it's like I was watching the water level rise over the course of the day, and it's pretty much overflowing. So,
yeah, it's yikes. And plus there's wind, so it's difficult to have an umbrella. I know Vancouverites don't like umbrellas, but I guess I'm not a proper Vancouverite because I do.
So, no, and I wonder if we've talked about this in the podcast before, but like I am a Vancouver, born and raised. I may not be as, born and raised as people would like, because over time my family moved to the suburbs, as many have. But I honestly only bring an umbrella out if I have to stand like at a park for like a long time. And if it's just like going to work or walking around town.
I think I'm still quite European in that sense. Like, I don't like raincoats. I know.
I don't have a raincoat though.
What do you do then?
Well, I have so like the coats that I have sort of vary. Like for the longest time, I didn't have a true winter coat because in Vancouver, you don't really need it. I have one now because we've actually seen some colder, some snowier weather as of late. But generally, it's sort of the material varies from where it's like the fall sort of spring weather. It's cool. I just need something, a layer over top, to turning into from like cloth into more like nylon base, so a little more wickable. But generally speaking, and I don't have something that one would truly call a rain jacket, because I find when I put them on, it's not like I stay dry. I start to sweat. Like it keeps all this humid air inside. So if I have to like commute or do a lot of walking, I'm wet, but now I'm like wet right down my back where I was sweating. Like,
yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's me being vain, but I'd rather bring an umbrella and wear a nice coat.
There's nothing wrong with that. There truly isn't. I think the only complaint I have when it comes to the use of umbrellas is how so many people will use umbrellas and walk undercover with them. Like, where they have the construction on the sidewalk, where there's an overhang, and their umbrella's up. Well, I'm sorry, but you have an umbrella. You don't need to be under and out of the rain. But,
yeah. No, you have to be aware, especially if you're as short as I am. But
and
I think I have good umbrella etiquette.
Yeah, I'm not knocking, there's nowhere else to go. I'm not asking for people to walk in the street, but like when there's a clear space for you to be, and what you're doing is you have your umbrella up, you're undercover, and you're like as close to the building as possible. So you're actually probably even walking against the flow of people, being that we're in North America, and generally you walk on the right, pass, opposite goes on the left. I get from, the old country, things get a little different. Just saying.
Yeah, but I walk on the right now. It annoys me when people don't, especially in these social distancing times.
You're one of us. You're one of us.
Yeah. Oh, God. I'm sort of.
Yeah. But if that episode on Monday had actually worked out, we actually kicked it off talking about how we had our first Off the Rails episode for our patrons who subscribe at the listening it level or up. If you don't know anything about Off the Rails, it's essentially like an after hours type podcast episode that we used to record every couple of weeks. It had gone on hiatus for a number of reasons. Most of them were actually technical in nature. We didn't have the opportunity to record in the hotbox because we'd always run out of time. And then we hadn't found a solution virtually that would allow things to work. That said, Anna and I did record an episode last week. We talked about Chris Evans and how he shared Chris Evans. We talked about podcast recommendations. It's a little more risque in that, conversation.
Yeah, it's C4 After Dark type thing.
Yeah.
A lot more nonsense than just umbrellas and rain.
That's true. But one of our patrons, Lisa Martin, she gave us some kind words about what it is that we do. And, it's nice that we're providing this additional content to our listeners, our patrons. So if you are a patron and you are at the listening in level, you want to go to patreon.com/C4podcast, you want to log in, you want to listen to that episode. And if you haven't done so already, get that RSS feed, drop it into whatever your podcast application happens to be. It'll automatically download them for you in the future, so you don't have to go and log in. The other thing I also need to do is give a shout out to Rich, who has actually been a patron of ours now for a few months. Being a patron for C4 gets you access to our patron chat channel, which is where we tend to share the juicier juice. Like if it's C4MZ, patron chat's probably where it's going to go. We also obviously have this additional content we're now starting to create again. So Rich, thank you for your support. It's what helps us keep the lights on. Ultimately, without our patrons, the money would come out of my pocket to keep C4 in business. So you're actually ensuring that I'm not spending money to make this happen. I probably would, let's be honest. But as we've become more popular over the years, the cost to actually run this podcast has increased. On that final sort of note, the Full Press Coverage Network does have ads. I recognize that for our listeners, some of you may hear ads. Those ads are to support us and provide hosting. We don't receive any money from them.
Yeah, they're not making us rich.
No, not at all. Not making us nothing. But the benefit in that is that it alleviates some of that sort of cost. So again, we recognize that they're there. We've tried to package them together. There aren't as many as there were on our previous arrangement. So hopefully those of you who do understand that they exist, understand for that reason. So what are we going to talk about here, Anna?
Right. Well, we're going to talk about what we talked about before, but we're going to talk about NHL awards because Monday was the day that the Calder Trophy was finally announced, along with some other awards. The Hart and the Norris were announced, and then previously there was also the Selke was announced previously, I think. Yeah, because they kind of came out in bursts. We're going to talk a little about the Stanley Cup Final and how that's progressing. And then we're going to go back to what we talked about before about off-season moves, and that's the ever-evolving issue of the goalie controversy because it's Vancouver. So that issue's going to rumble on. And, goalie options out there if we do end up losing one of our goalies. And also maybe some options on the blue line as well.
Kicking things off is the Calder race. It was a 2-horse race. I think most people out there would agree it was Cale Makar versus Quinn Hughes. The struggle is that there are a few people out there that might tell you otherwise. And in all honesty, I think those people are maybe a little bit out of touch with reality. Now, it's not to suggest that Cale Makar or Quinn Hughes was going to be the winner. Absolutely. It was a 2-horse race. It was right down to the wire. And if you happen to be a Vancouver Canucks fan, you'll probably already know that Quinn Hughes did not win the Calder Trophy. He was close. In points, it was
close. But when it came down to it, the difference in first place votes was quite sizable. So,
well, and that's where clearly with the PWHA, the professional or PHWA, sorry, Professional Hockey Writers Association, which votes on most of these awards, to the majority of them, Cale Makar was number 1. Quinn Hughes was clearly number 2. It does get a little bit screwy, though, is that there were a number of people who didn't even feel that Quinn Hughes was worth a number 2 vote or a number 1 vote. No, he actually got a few number 3s.
Yeah, that's a bit weird. I mean, there was a couple other strong rookies, but I just think it was just far and away the two of them above the pack. So, and I don't think that's tunnel vision. I think that was the feeling from most people from the start, but clearly not all writers.
Yeah. Well, and, looking at the way the votes broke down, Dominik Kubalik, who came in third, and he was third by far. It wasn't even close at that point for him. There were 2 writers out there that placed him second. And based on the PHWA's actual transparency, if you want to, you go to their website, I think it's the phwa.com or something like that. Mm-hmm. They have a sheet. You can go and see who voted for who. And there were some out there that had Kubalik ahead of Quinn Hughes, which that shocks me. In fact, it wasn't just Kubalik that got ahead of him. Adam Fox got votes ahead of Quinn Hughes. In fact, someone said Adam Fox was the clear-cut first-place Calder Trophy winner. One person.
I know. And I have actually had a conversation on Twitter with the writer that did that, Murat, who writes for The Athletic in Winnipeg. I followed him for quite a while, read some of his stuff, which is honestly unusual for me to read market stuff, but his is pretty good. But yeah, his justification was that the New York defense was the biggest mess.
Okay.
And kind of fell off a cliff. For me, that doesn't check out because Vancouver defense. I guess his argument would be that the defense Vancouver didn't get suddenly bad. It's just kind of always been a bit rubbish for the last couple of years. So, but yeah, I disagree with him on this point. But I do like the transparency. Obviously, the PHWA are going to publish the votes anyway, but it's good to get the discussion going.
Sure, but you look at the breakdown, and Cale Makar, he either had first place or second place votes. There's really no argument there. I obviously am a little biased towards Quinn Hughes, but the fact that Hughes was getting third place votes, of which he got 6 of them, is shocking to me because, that's now telling us that, the Adam Fox votes. So there were 2 people that voted for Adam Fox, a first and second place vote. Those 2 people felt Hughes was number 3. There were 2 people that voted for Dominik Kubalik at second. Those 2 people voted for Quinn Hughes to be 6. And then Elvis Merzlikins and Mackenzie Blackwood both got second place votes. And both of those people felt that Quinn Hughes was below. So that's the part that sort of I struggle with. What is it that they saw about these other players that they weren't seeing from Quinn Hughes? Unless when we start looking at the teams they play for, a Chicago, a New York, a Columbus, a New Jersey, that we're maybe reinforcing the Eastern Coast bias that they're in bed. Too early to see Quinn play.
Yeah, but they I don't think you can. I mean, Cal McCall's on Mountain Time, right? He plays most of his games there. I guess our argument of putting Quinn Hughes ahead is that just Colorado's would be an easier team to play for. I mean, it's a young team. And Cal McCaw's, don't get me wrong, such a huge talent and big part of that. But
well, you take Cale Makar out of the Colorado lineup, they're still a really good team. You take Quinn Hughes out of the Vancouver lineup, they're a good team, right? There is a difference between where Colorado is today and where the Vancouver Canucks are today. I'm not throwing shade at the Canucks. Colorado is a really good team. They've got so much going for them. They've got a really young core, a real talented roster. They have absolutely no cap troubles. Right now, going into the next season, they aren't actually even at the floor yet. So they have so much room within their cap to sort of build out. Whereas the Vancouver Canucks, they're so close to the ceiling. It's a struggle. So again, I have no problem with Cale Makar getting the trophy, the Calder Trophy. It's well deserved. I just feel if we start really picking things apart, Quinn Hughes probably deserved more first place votes than he received.
Yeah.
And did not deserve those 6 third-place votes. Fast forward to when the actual voting took place. It took place, I believe, in June, prior to the resumption of hockey. If writers had had an opportunity to see Quinn Hughes in the playoffs, I think we then start to see that adjustment in the votes.
Yeah. I mean, it's a shame. Obviously, Cale Makar got injured. We thought that might have been the award sewn up for Quinn, but not to be. But you're right. It should have been a little closer.
Yeah. The other awards that got handed out, we had Connor Hellebuyck get the Vezina Trophy as best goaltender. Leon Draisaitl got the Hart Memorial, so most valuable player. The Norris Trophy went to Roman Josi. And then other awards that had been handed out, Draisaitl also got Ted Lindsay. Dum got the King Clancy. Bobby Ryan got Masterson. Selke went to Sean Couturier. McKinnon got Lady Byng. Bruce Cassidy got Jack Adams, so on and so forth. I mean, we could continue to go on, but the 2 awards that I found interesting. One, Hart Trophy. Is this an Edmonton Oiler award now?
I mean, maybe in a sense that they have so few good players that if you take either Leon Draisaitl or Connor McDavid out of the lineup, then their team falls apart. So yeah, they're the most valuable players by a long shot, but I think it's a stupid award.
Draisaitl got first and Connor McDavid got third. Like, 2 Edmonton Oiler players are essentially, fighting over the Hart Trophy. And I think this was the same way it was last year, if memory serves me correct.
But just tiny rant, because I've talked about this before, but if there is an Edmonton Oilers player coming first and third, it's not clear. It's not clear. This is the most valuable person to this team. It's not clear, right? Because it's either Draisaitl or McDavid. People can't come up with a consensus. So it can, by the definition, it can't be either of them. Because it's the most valuable player to their team. So it must be if you take them out, that team does not function. I agree, take both of them out, the team does not function. But clearly there isn't a big enough differential, I would say.
Yeah. I can't remember what the name of the trophy was where the 2 goaltenders would receive it in tandem.
The William Jennings?
Jennings. So it just got me thinking. It's almost like there needs to be a trophy for almost like line combinations or something like that. You know what I mean? Because to your point you're raising there is that, Draisaitl and McDavid could totally win the forward equivalent of the Jennings Trophy.
I was gonna say who would get nominated from the Canucks: Sutter, Petey, Horvat, whatever that stupid. No, I mean I've just named 3 centers there. Or
no, but
whatever that stupid NHL tweet was, being that this line though, or whatever they said, and I was just they played 3 minutes together all season, something like that.
Yeah,
crazy.
Sorry, I was going to point out that for the Hart Trophy, there were actually Canucks who got votes. Markstrom and Petey both got votes. Now, they didn't get first, second, or third place votes. I think Markstrom got a 4th place, and Petey got 2 5s. But there was some Canucks representation in getting points towards the Hart Trophy, which was interesting. And that takes me over to the Norris Trophy that Josie won. Quinn Hughes was getting himself recognition for the Norris Trophy. He got votes. Now, Cale Makar did as well. A number of the rookie defensemen found themselves votes. But I think this is a really good sign that not only is he being recognized as being a Calder contender, but to already start to get Norris, maybe not consideration, but recognition.
Yeah, it's a definite preview for the future. And I do think we waited a while to get another class of great defensemen because we feel like it's been Roman Josi and John Carlson just battling out for the Norris for years now. So there seems to have been that talent gap. So to have Adam Fox, to have Cale Makar, to have Quinn Hughes coming up, that's just really exciting.
Yeah. And we would be remiss not to point out that Jacob finished so close to the podium with the Vezina. Now, the clear-cut winner was Connor Hellebuyck. And I say clear-cut, but really clear cut based on the first place votes, but it was a lot closer between him and Rask than one might consider. Markstrom, though, was a distant fourth, but he was
a distant fourth.
He got 1 second place and 4 third place votes towards the trophies.
The top 3 winners had won the race, got their medals, gone home before Markstrom finished. But
sure.
But that's where Canucks see him. That's where I see him, top 5 in the league, 4th or 5th is where I would put him as this season. So it's nice to see that came across in the league, even if it's just below that elite group.
Yeah. Any other hockey award chatter?
I guess not. Just would like to see some recognition for Pedersen's defensive play in the Selke one day, but I don't think NHL writers necessarily have that imagination across the league.
Well, I think one of the struggles that PD has going for him is the perception that he's an offensive player. Mm-hmm. Again, having seen him perform in the playoffs, I think he's now maybe beginning to open up eyes that he's a much more well-rounded player than many had given him credit for. I mean, I look back at the Sedin's career. Early on in their career, they were often referred to as soft, unable to take the punishment. They were simply offensive players who, when they start getting focused on, could not produce, because that's all they were asked to do. Produce. Right. People would crap on them if they couldn't score goals. But considering the number of tough minutes that they had to work through and consume, they allowed that roster to evolve to a way that if you focus everything on the Sedins, then that Kessler line that would be trotted out would punish you, or the third line would come out and punish you. Like there was scoring across more than just one line.
Real depth, yeah.
And so that's where I think PD is sort of existing. Everyone knows, let's go shut down PD, and they don't have that much. Well, now, having seen the playoff performance of the Vancouver Canucks, presuming they can get most of the, top 2 lines back in Vancouver come next season.
Plus Tyler Mott.
And yes, of course, Tyler Mott. I think we're going to see that evolution. So I wouldn't doubt that PD gets maybe more consideration to a Selke in subsequent years. But we also have to honestly consider that Selke is often viewed as and I would say it's like the runner-up to the offensive trophies.
Yeah.
So when Kessler won the Selke, he wasn't getting any consideration really for anything else. You could argue, why wouldn't he have been in the conversation for the Hart?
Right.
So.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's hard to see it as a balance thing. I guess my last gripe about the awards would be Austin Matthews finishing second in Lady Byng voting the same season he got a sexual assault charge. So, but 2020 be that way.
It does, yeah. Let's talk a little bit about the Stanley Cup Final.
Sure.
You and I had said the winner of the Colorado Avalanche Dallas Stars series is going to win the Stanley Cup. Now, in our Monday episode, you walked that back a little on your end, saying, well, I thought it would be one of those 2 teams and Tampa. Like you were covering your bases here. So I'll cut you a little slack. I had committed to the Dallas Stars, seeing as they were the winner of that Western Conference matchup, would ultimately win the Stanley Cup. So after game 1, it kind of looked like Dallas was going to be that dominant team. We were recording on Monday during game 2. Tampa came back, tied it up. Lo and behold, they're playing right now, and I can't say I saw the score.
It's 5-2 to Tampa Bay with 5 minutes left.
So that's going to be a game 3 winner for Tampa. So maybe you're more closely aligned with what the result might be than
clearly I was covering myself. I didn't remember that I said that. What we really need is the list to come back. Long-time listeners will remember Anders Lau keeping the list. But because maybe I did say that, but in my pool I picked Tampa. So if Tampa win, or it goes to 7 games, I win our pool.
Yeah.
If Dallas wins, somebody else does. So, I'm kind of hoping Tampa win.
Well, we sort of touched on this, is that if the Dallas Stars were to win the Stanley Cup, is that a good thing for the NHL? And the point that I'm trying to convey is that the style of hockey the Dallas Stars play may not be conducive to the type of hockey that I think we as Canucks fans may want to see. Not to suggest that blue-collar hockey doesn't have a place. I don't mind blue-collar hockey, but I like the fast hockey. Like Tampa plays the style that I would want to see from Vancouver, more so than Dallas. And if there's one thing we know about the NHL, it's the winner of the Stanley Cup almost dictates the change that teams take. Case in point, Vancouver Canucks lose to the Bruins in 2011, and everyone's talking about how the Canucks need to get tougher. The Canucks were doing quite fine until the actual Stanley Cup Final, where, unfortunately, they were built to capitalize on special teams and didn't.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that Boston didn't deserve to win that Stanley Cup Final. They did. I don't think that the discipline issues, let's just put that in that one box, was the entirety of the story. But I do think that, yeah, that story was massively overplayed. And I think it really set Vancouver hockey and maybe like league hockey back. And it took them a while. I mean, with still, what was it, last season, hearing the like narrative of North American heart and European skill. And it's just so narrow-minded to think of hockey that way. So I think we are emerging out of that in the last couple of years, but it's held hockey back, and you do hope it doesn't go back that way to that stifling hockey that Dallas does play, especially against Vancouver. Like, Vancouver really struggled against Dallas. If they had squeaked past Vegas, I did not rate their chances. But so yeah, from that point of view, would be better if Tampa won. From the market point of view, I mean, Gary Bettman would love it for Dallas to win. Like, that's just expanding the market even further. But
good Southern hockey.
Yeah, exactly.
Just the way the game was meant to be played. I don't know. I still think as much as I might suggest it's the Dallas Stars Cup to lose, I do want to see the Lightning win, because if there is going to be this mimicking of styles, I would prefer that the Canucks, or even other teams that the Canucks might play, try to emulate what Tampa has created, because it's a much more fast-paced, exciting style. It's something I enjoy watching.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And in terms of, like, I don't really have a fondness for either team or players. I kind of like Tyler Seguin for his social conscience. Anton Hudobin, what a great story. But
well, no, there's a lot of likable players, and there's likable storylines with Dallas. I mean, Bones behind the bench.
Yeah, totally.
Right? Like, yeah. I mean, I'm not knocking what we see. It's just it's the style that's got them there, and my worry about what it might mean in the future. That's all. If they win it, I'm happy for them. I truly would be. And if the NHL were not to follow suit in emulation, all the better.
Yeah, I mean, I won't go too much into this, but maybe if Dallas win, if Dallas lose, Anton Hudobin hits the market at a cheaper cost, maybe.
Something we might be talking about a little bit later in the episode. As we look to wrap up Rewind, it should also be noted that the NHL has released statistics to reinforce that of all the testing that they have performed for COVID-19 over the course of the resumption to play and the playoffs and the play-ins and everything leading up to it, they have tested positive 0 times. This is big news. I think, and I mean, heck, I'll own it. I suggested that it was likely not to be the case. I mean, we saw the Major League Soccer have issues with their bubble and players bringing the virus in. We saw this in other sports, Major League Baseball, like, again, North American professional sports. Baseball a little bit different because they didn't fully bubble, but I sort of presumed that it was going to find a way in and there would be positive tests. There hasn't. So, I have to applaud the NHL for how they've approached their return to play. We're looking at other leagues. Like, I mean, you wouldn't have heard this on Monday, but the KHL currently has a whole lot of trouble on their hands. What team was it that they didn't have a coaching staff and like it was the owner behind the bench or something like that.
Yep. This was discussion in Gate 16 on Discord today, so join in for other fun news. SKA. That's where the outbreak is, which is Podkolzin's team. I thought it was the opposition team, but no, it's Podkolzin's team.
Okay, so and that's what you had thought was what I had sort of presented. That's why I didn't know the team. I knew I thought it was who Podkolzin was going to be playing against. Still, it's again entirely different continent, entirely different approach with the KHL. But let's look back at sort of North American sports. You have college football that's having issues right now. While Major League Baseball has somewhat slowed their positive test rate down, that's still occurring. NFL football is resuming play, and they're resuming play in front of fans.
Yeah, like 20,000 last week, something like that.
Yeah, like I was watching the Kansas City Chiefs play again. I think it was not this past weekend; it was the weekend before, where it's like, oh yeah, look at their social distancing. Oh yeah, they were not. They were. It was essentially there was space between seats, but there was a lot of cross contamination.
Yeah, I mean, back home they've scrapped all plans to introduce socially distanced fans. I mean, the UK was likely going into a second lockdown. So yeah, bad news over there. I mean, they got through an entire summer of cricket without any positive tests. Wasn't quite as biosecure as NHL because they had 2 bubbles and they did get to go home between like 2 series, for example, but it's been pretty secure. It's definitely more secure than like baseball.
Where the players were just, like, how are you going to expect us to stay cooped up? We want to have a good time.
Yeah, but it's very clear, like in Premier League, there's been issues.
Well, like City has positive tests.
Spurs have positive tests.
Yeah.
In cricket, it's happened. Players have got it. Like in domestic cricket, it's happened. So unless you have the money to completely do everything biosecure, which doesn't seem like a long-term option, even in NHL, that seems like not a long-term option. One, that the players will be willing to do, and 2, that the NHL could afford. So.
No, and quite frankly, me as a fan,
no,
I'm apprehensive. Like I'm fine with what experience I'm receiving watching sports on TV. Like I will own the fact that I had said, you know what, if sports don't come back, I'm okay with that. I'm really enjoying how on the weekend I got football on. We talked about this sort of early on in the pandemic, how I missed the noise. Like I didn't necessarily pay attention to baseball or to football or to golf or whatever might be on the TV, but it was like a way to unplug, relax, and that was what was missing. So I am appreciative that I'm back into that space where, I'll have a football game on the weekend, or I might tune in to watch the, last 2 quarters of Sunday Night Football or whatever it might be. So.
But yeah, it's going to be interesting. I mean, hockey has a while to figure it out, I guess.
Well, there's still Bettman talking about the possibility of an 82 game season for
starting in January. That's insane.
Yeah, they'll just play every second day.
Yeah, I mean,
it'll be over by summer.
It's going to be tricky to figure out, and I just don't know if it's going to get a lot better between now and when they have to figure it out.
Yeah. But we've got time, and as do you. We're going to take ourselves a quick break before we could dive into Half Full, Half Empty, talk a little bit about the Vancouver Canucks off-season roster moves and the potential as to what it might mean. You're listening to the C4 Canucks Hockey Podcast on CanucksHockeyBlog.com and the Full Press Coverage Network.
Take hitting out of the game. You can't hit anymore, so don't do it.
The unsportsmanlike conduct, I want to get an explanation on that.
No kidding.
Because how do you get suspended for unsportsmanlike conduct?
Plus interference. There's no interference there. He had the puck.
Now, Madison never ever did that before. Now, why did he do it? Because he was mad.
Well, your early favorite for the Calder Trophy, that's for sure. Elias Pettersson, you might even say your early favorite for the Hart Trophy.
Just to get back to your question, Elias is going to play plenty. He's going to get a lot of power play time. And yeah, I'm concerned about our offense. We lost 200-point players, and we've got to find a way to score.
Anna, I have to give some shade to former co-host Clay Emo here.
Do it.
See, if anyone here recalls, it was Clay Emo, one of the most positive people in the Canucks social media sphere, what I will often refer to as the Smylosphere. Give credit to Pasitopoulos, who I believe are trying to distance themselves from the term these days. But Clay Emo, when it looked dire against the Vegas Golden Knights, said he would prefer the Canucks win, even if it were to mean a goaltending controversy with Thatcher Demko between the pipes. Well, the Vancouver Canucks, knowing that they owed Clay a solid, obliged, and they're providing him a goaltending controversy. Now, you might suggest us here at C4 are simply awfulizing and getting all worked up about nothing, but it kind of looks like the Vancouver Canucks may let Markstrom go to the market, and based on the scuttlebutt we're hearing, there appears to be some teams that are seriously willing to offer them more money in term than the Vancouver Canucks are willing to give him. So, Anna, how comfortable are you if Markstrom isn't a Vancouver Canuck next year and it is long live Thatcher Demko?
I mean, not very. I've kind of been Team Marky for a while. Obviously, the distance between them has closed quite a bit. And I understand, talked over this over with Sam, I understand how Demko is the better option long term, just with Markstrom's age, but this team is built for a short window. And by the time that, window of Markstrom expires, 3 years, I think we have him good for the next 3 years, and then, maybe not. I think we'll have all kinds of issues anyway, so this... I don't know, it's so tricky, but the amount that you might have to invest in improving the blue line in order to, help Thatcher Demko might mean you don't save that much money.
Yeah. Well, on the note of money, a few episodes ago, you, Matt, and I were chatting a little bit about what will the Vancouver Canucks need to do to free up cash. They needed to make a signing or two, they needed to get space. And we had sort of presumed that there needed to be a player leaving, an Eriksson, a Sutter, Pearson, Beagle, essentially a higher contract finding their way to another roster. And I know you're quite big on the fact that Sutter has the Sutter name, and that needs to mean something in the NHL more than sort of his more...
I mean, it shouldn't, but I feel like it does.
So there's some cred there.
Mm-hmm.
We also talked about the possibility that Michael Furlan's future was questionable, and make it very, very clear. We like what Michael Furlan brings as a player. We want him in our roster, but we also recognize he needs to ensure he is healthy. And so if he was to be on the LTIR, that provides some mechanism for the Vancouver Canucks to at least spend a little bit more, because it'll give them the flexibility to go above the cap with relief. But a Markstrom departure does also provide some flexibility. Now, before someone were to go and start doing math, Chris, he's an unrestricted free agent. How does this provide room? We have to consider that Markstrom currently was making, I was at $3.67 million per, at least that was his cap hit. Mm. So if he were to come back to Vancouver, that goes up. So he's eating into what available room exists. And the scuttlebutt is that there are teams willing to offer him $6 million per for 5-6 years. Is that the number that the Vancouver Canucks want to afford?
No, and don't get me wrong, not. I don't want to sign Marky to a crazy contract. I'm not Marky at any cost.
Yeah. So if we consider a Thatcher Demko sort of as your 1A or 1B, however it were to play out, it's actually a much more affordable goaltending situation, because I'm confident that the Vancouver Canucks could find a 1B for less than $3.7 million. And if that's the case, that's actually some room that you're sort of getting back, not having to tie that much up in your crease. Room that you can then spend on the blue line or potentially up front to, whether it be a Toffoli or what have you. Now, the only pause that I have is that if anyone's like, oh, Demko is it, let's get rid of Marky. We've only really seen Demko in 3 games. I know we've seen him more, but 3 games where you could say, okay, this is the type of pressure that he needs to face regularly. Like, consider how many times
against one team.
Yeah, against one team. How many times did Marky have to stand on his head to stop about 103 shots in a night? I know that I'm exaggerating here, but
yeah.
Is Demko up to that? Can Demko carry that load over the course of a long season? I don't know.
Yeah, and you have to think, obviously, again, this is on small sample size because Demko's not played that much, but Markstrom gave up, what did he give up? 1 clear-sided goal the whole postseason, I think, put together. Whereas Demko gives a lot of what we might term easier shots. Like, he struggles with, it's not whereas, yeah, basically Markstrom is so consistent at that level, whereas Demko really isn't. But has he had the time to be consistent? No. So it's not really a fair measure, but in terms of technique, I was listening to Kevin Woodley talk about him. He's still not there yet.
Mm-hmm.
He's developing and he's taking steps, but he's still not a solid player from a technical standpoint.
Mm-hmm. So even if he is the future and the future is close, we still need sort of the 1B or potentially the 1A to help him develop. So let's sort of play a game of, Canucks without Marky. Looking at the free agent goaltenders, and let's be realistic, it's possible the Canucks could swing a deal and find a goaltender under contract. Okay, sure. But when we look at free agent goaltenders, we had talked about Anton Khudobin. Currently, he's in Dallas. He's going to become an unrestricted free agent. Might the Vancouver Canucks try to make a play for him? His cap hits 2.5 in his last contract, but he's going to get a raise. This postseason has guaranteed that. Is he going to get big raise? Leonard, I think, was being signed for, was it $5 million? Was the offer?
Yeah, I think
can't remember.
That's correct.
That's we're getting up to sort of what we were willing to pay Markstrom, so that might not be a bad thing. But then we also consider Khudobin at 34 as essentially a Markstrom at age and sort of where he is in his career. What does that mean for the future of Thatcher Demko in a Vancouver Canucks uniform? Because I would imagine Demko wants to become a starter.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's tricky, and whatever happens to Dallas now, Khudobin's had a very impressive run in the postseason. So if I'm Dallas and I have a 33-year-old starting goaltender, do you want 2 goalies who are in their mid-30s? Probably not, but yeah. Anton Khudobin might be priced out of the Canucks price range, or Dallas might re-sign him. Who knows? Mm-hmm. Other options, Holtby, I think, will be a little pricey for the Canucks also.
Well, and he's at 6.1 right now. That's, the end of a contract. Or 6.1 is the cap hit. It's going to come down, but will it come down significantly? I don't know. I also then would question, when you go out and you acquire a Holtby who, age 30, is technically getting into his goaltending prime, are the Vancouver Canucks committing to Holtby over a Demko? I'm not against that idea, and I think the scuttlebutt is that Holtby would be willing to come to Vancouver.
And by the way, super nice guy and great ambassador for the game, but that's just sidebar.
The point, though, is that, we're talking about sort of a goaltender and money that almost screams number 1, not 1A. Number 1.
Right.
So I think if I were to ask you this, if it's the right goaltender, are you willing to go get the number 1? Maybe use Demko as a mechanism to negotiate for something, either to improve the team or to help get some of these contracts out of the roster, and then potentially look at developing someone like Mikey DiPietro, who he's well away from being maybe even a backup in the NHL? Or would you prefer to maybe get a 1A, 1B type of situation? Because the scuttlebutt, and I keep using this term profusely today, but in C4 Discord in Gate 16 was the possibility of someone like Cam Talbot. Cam Talbot is only 32 years old. He's a very serviceable goaltender. Like this past season, his save percentage was .919 over the course of 26 games. So that was actually, for the number of games played, 26, that's a reasonable number. That's third in the league for save percentage. His contract last year was only 2.75. He'll probably get a slight bump, I would imagine. Is that the type of goaltender that you go and commit to? Because I think the Canucks might have a chance to get him at a reasonable number and for a reasonable term.
Yeah, I mean, it's that kind of level. I know Thomas Greiss is an option as well, pending UFA. For my money, I would be more comfortable with a Thomas Greiss option.
9-13, 31 games played, age 34. He was 3.333333.
Okay, yeah, I was about to ask. So yeah, I mean, it might be much of a muchness, but I prefer Thomas Greiss as a goaltender. If we're going that route of 1A, 1B, that is. I do think it's kind of wild to let your starting goaltender hit the UFA market in order to save money, invest in your future, and then pay like a significant chunk of money. That's my only worry with Holtby.
Sure. But I think the Vancouver Canucks are in this position based on the play of Demko in the playoffs. If Demko doesn't acquit himself as well as he did, where he essentially caused the Vegas Golden Knights to knock themselves out of the playoffs because they got fully Demko'd, Vancouver Canucks are probably throwing money at Markstrom. Markstrom comes back at whatever he probably wants. Demko's play has now given the Vancouver Canucks some leverage they didn't otherwise have, which is why this might actually occur, where he goes and finds himself another team. He may come back to Vancouver, and that would be fantastic too, but the exploration of the market has to do with the performance of Demko. I do get what you're saying when we start talking about someone, like a Holtby or a Talbot, where there's some comfortability with Thomas Greiss. But then I start to wonder, might there be other options, like a Mike Smith, who is definitely in the swan song of his career. He'd be outright cheap. And if there was one benefit of having Smith in a Canucks uniform, is at least he wouldn't be diving to get penalties against Vancouver. He'd be diving to get penalties for Vancouver.
Yeah. I mean, it still blows my mind how that works, but it does.
Or Ryan Miller, for instance, would be dirt cheap if he wanted to come back to Vancouver. And again, at the stage of his career where he'd probably accept being that mentor. I mean, I think back to sort of I think it was the Cloutier days where Bob Essensa, backup Bob, was the goaltender. Now, backup Bob, great guy. He was there to try to provide some like level-headed support. And I think he did very well. I wonder if maybe that's what Demko could use, is a goaltender who's understanding that he is there to help develop the young kid that sits on the bench with him or happens to start before him, and is fully committed to that with the chance to win. Let's reasonably consider the Vancouver Canucks should be a playoff contender next season. And if you're in the playoffs, anyone's got a chance.
I mean, you're right. From the point of view of that goaltender, you have to be at a point in your career where you're pretty much done. And that's not the kind of person I want to be backing up, because something could easily happen to Demko as it did to Markstrom.
True.
Like, I just want, if we're trusting Demko, I just want to back up that I feel comfortable putting in, like, on any given night. That's why I think it should be a more 1B situation. But because I think you're saying if you take Demko and let Markstrom walk, or at least you let him explore his options and he ends up going, I think what you're saying is, like, we don't need to win right now. Like, you're just like, we're a growing team, we're competing, sure, but I don't think you're saying like we're winning right now.
No, and I think we talked about this with Sam last week. The window that the Vancouver Canucks right now happen to reside in is one where their cap pressure exists for a variety of reasons, tough contracts, recapture penalty for Luongo, and the fact that the pandemic has essentially flattened the cap for, I think it was 5 seasons is what they've planned on.
Right.
So during this period of time, the Vancouver Canucks need to be prudent with the money that they're spending. Eventually, we're going to have to start spending it, like guaranteed to spend it to keep Petey, to keep Besser, to keep Quinn. Horvat's deal will be coming up. I mean, I wouldn't sort of cross that bridge as sort of when we get there. I think if the Vancouver Canucks are smart, they probably look at being competitive, getting these opportunities, really growing the team, like sort of what Colorado has done, and then get themselves in a position where they're almost so rich with player depth that they can leverage and weaponize that. We've talked about the Vancouver Canucks weaponizing in the market when they had cap space, and they did a poor job to do that. If they can't weaponize cap space, why not weaponize the great players you have in your roster?
I mean, we've said this before, but we're going to have to let a sizable asset go.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully that's someone replaceable with a cheap option, like Brendan Sutter, or someone of that caliber, where someone can do the same job for cheap. But you look at our defensive end, and I think might be a good transition to talk about that. And there might be a player going that we don't want to go, and that isn't necessarily easily replaceable at the same value, like maybe Chris Tanev.
Well, okay, let's segue. Let's talk about the blue line. Chris Tanev is rumored to also be looking to explore free agency, and the hot rumor is that the Pittsburgh Penguins are really interested in acquiring his services. Now, why might he go to Pittsburgh? Well, they're, annually a strong team. His brother happens to be there. If there's one thing that I've heard about NHL brothers is they really like the opportunity to play together. So, there's that going for them. I don't know if you were to have asked me of Markstrom, Tanev, or potentially Toffoli, who would be the least likely to go. In my mind, it would have been Tanev. Like, I view the Vancouver Canucks looking to bring Tanev back. They might be willing to explore a Markstrom departure. Toffoli, I sort of presume, wouldn't be coming back because they just couldn't afford him. But with how the Vancouver Canucks blue line happens to be, the fact that he's a right-handed defenseman, like it's just or sort of right side defenseman.
But I mean, we talked about this briefly on Monday, and now we're given the opportunity to kind of point to an example of it. But the tricky problem with Canucks literally advertising their priorities is sign Marky, then sign Toffoli, then sign Tanev. Tanev's been waiting there pretty patiently since the start of the season, waiting for a new deal and saying, I understand that it's not their priority right now, but I'm still trying to discuss it. And he's been saying that all year. And, there comes to a point where he's just like, well, maybe see what else is out there. I do agree. I think it was J-Pat who said that maybe like playing with your brother isn't like top of a, free agents priority list. Like, it would be nice, but
it's a nice to have. You're right, not priority, but Pittsburgh's in a position where they might be able to offer some money that the Vancouver Canucks aren't able to offer.
Exactly.
I don't know about term. I'm really unsure about the term, but the money side is there's some flexibility there. But you look at where the Vancouver Canucks, sit with their blue line. The right side is rough. Like, I'm not saying rough in so much players. Like, there's the depth's missing there.
Yeah,
there would be complete reliance on a Brogan Rafferty or is he a Levy on the right or is he on the left? Jalen Chatfield, I guess, would be right side, I think.
Right. So, I think it kind of goes without saying that Canucks need to find a cheap option. Whether Tanev stays or goes, like, need to find a cheap option at the bottom of that defense. So they're kind of banking on an ELC contract coming through to finish up that defense. Because, Vandenberg's gone. He was very cheap, but ELC would be obviously a better option there. We've got one more year of Ben, unless that can be tagged on to a deal that.
Yeah, I think sort of to bring the topic of the conversation over. Harmon over on The Athletic had written that he had felt there were 7 options for the Vancouver Canucks to go make a deal when it comes to acquiring players on the cheap. Now, deal adds complexity. We don't know how that deal plays out. But he had listed Cernak, Ekblad, Murphy, Weegar, Dunba, Jensen, and Severson as 7 solid, right side defensemen. Actually, I don't know if they're all right side, but essentially to help build out the blue line. The hot rumor is Dunba, because there's apparently already a deal for Besser to go the other way, because Brock Besser needs to go and play in Minnesota, and Dunba gets to come to Vancouver. But I don't know how that works. The Vancouver Canucks then hurt themselves up front to solidify the blue line somewhat, and Dunba brings with him a contract.
Yeah, sizable contract. More of an offensive defenseman, and we got one of those. I don't know if his defensive deficiencies really counteract our current. I don't think they're really made up for by his offensive contributions. He does have a good upside, don't get me wrong, but yeah, with that contract. And also, I don't necessarily think Minnesota do that deal. I'm sure they are very fond of Brock Besser, but they need centers. Yeah. So yeah, I don't think that's a great option. As much as I admire Dunbar as a person.
Well, okay, of that 7, are there any there that sort of pique your interest?
I want another Nick Jensen. We have the jersey already. Just
slap another number on it.
Just write 51 on it. I don't know. I presume we aren't getting another 51 season patch, but I don't know. That seems like a good. Maybe there's this cowardly but middle of the road option.
Well, his contract is nice. It doesn't hurt the Vancouver Canucks significantly. He's reliable. Maybe not the flashy, defenseman that people might want to see, but let's look at Chris Tanev.
Yeah,
he wasn't all that flashy either.
We need a sure thing. Yeah, stay at home is good.
So, yeah,
he's not that big-bodied defenseman, but again, I think that's kind of overvalued, and I'd rather have hands in decision making.
I agree. I look at those options, and I think that's the one that may fit best. Again, doesn't necessarily make it a thing, because deals must be swung to make said moves possible.
Yeah, it's true. And having now listened to Harm talk about Wiegand and Severson on our pals over at Canucks Conversation, I'm a little more convinced of them. I kind of was shying away from picking either of those, not having heard of Mackenzie Weegar before ever. Sorry, Florida. But yeah, a little more confident on those, but my instinct would still be to pick Jensen out of that group.
Yeah. So that leaves us with, I'm not to throw shade at Troy from Richmond. I think if Tanev goes, Troy from Richmond's a sure thing.
Yeah.
Good for Troy. I have nothing against Troy. I simply felt that Troy from Richmond was a numbers casualty.
Yeah. And it's one of those things. I would like to see him stay, but yeah, might be a unfortunate loss there. Just don't have the money or the space.
But that brings us to Tyler Toffoli, who I don't think anyone ever thought was going to be coming back to Vancouver.
No.
Like, there was the possibility that, if, Jim Benning were to work some crazy magic and suddenly make contracts disappear or swing crazy deals or who knows what, and then the pandemic sort of hits teams hard. There's a ton of teams that have no space. Not a lot of trading partners out there. So it's like, okay, well, I guess Toffoli's going to go back to the, sunshine of California. Yet, for all reports I've seen, Toffoli is really wanting to stay in Vancouver. He wants to sign for reasonable money. Like, I'm blown away. I'm not going to say that is the greatest name for the Vancouver Canucks, but if at the end of the day Toffoli sticks around and the Canucks lose a Tanev, lose a Markstrom, the sky didn't completely fall down as it might have.
Yeah, we had a rumor a couple of weeks ago at 4 times 4.8. Was that the rumor? Great if that works, but I don't want to sell the farm to pay for Toffoli, and would love him to see him come back at a reasonable price tag, but as much as he's excited to play for Vancouver, I don't think he's going to move heaven and earth to stay here either. So,
no, but if you look at the Canucks, top lines. You got Besser at 5'8", Bose at 5'5", JT is at 5'2". You then have some sizable contracts to Sutter at 4'3". You got Louis at 6. Sutter and Louis are paid more than where they sort of sit on the team. So arguably, there is room to have another, $5 million contract. And I say room loosely. I know the cap says otherwise, but you wouldn't be too upset if that was giving you the top line or top two line, production that you would expect. If Louis Eriksson was providing us top line production, no one would complain about his $6 million.
No, that's for sure. We've been over Louis so many times, but I think they're going to have to find a solution. And if that can't come via trade, then I hope you like bus rides, Louis.
Yeah. But there we have it. I mean, it'll be interesting to see how everything plays out. Obviously, with the Stanley Cup playoffs still happening, we're probably not going to see a whole lot of movement. It's possible that, there are re-ups that take place, but I'm going to imagine that things will settle down once the league has got a sort of more concrete timeline in front of it.
Right. But the draft is not that far off.
True. It's not like the Vancouver Canucks will be drafting in the first 2 rounds, though.
Yeah, but it's 2 weeks away. That's crazy.
Yeah.
And the Stanley Cup is still going on. Madness.
Yeah. No. I think it was J-Pat shared a tweet that I think it was him and PJ, I think it was. Oh, no, it might have been Drance. They were sitting in a Browns out in Abbotsford for 6 hours waiting for a preseason matchup. And they were talking about sort of the future of the podcast. It's amazing that this time last year it was preseason, and here we are. You're right, still waiting for the winner of the Stanley Cup playoffs. One final note when it comes to Vancouver Canucks news. I'm old enough to remember, but what I knew of as GM Place and is now the Rogers Arena just passed its 25th anniversary. For those that don't know, the building was built by the Griffiths family, the former owners of the Vancouver Canucks, and they essentially financed it privately, which in the grand scheme of things is huge. Most big stadiums in major cities in Canada, United States, use public funding. Like, this is a big thing. So when, Arthur Griffiths and his family found ways to finance it, that's like crazy talk. Unfortunately, a combination of the new building, the acquisition of the land, the acquisition of the Grizzlies franchise, a dollar that kind of tanked, stretched them thin. Griffiths had to bring in some partners, John McCaw being one of them. Eventually, McCaw bought the remaining interest Griffiths had, and Arthur and family no longer were involved. But the reason I bring this up is the Area 51 podcast had an opportunity to sit down with Arthur Griffiths and talk to him and reminisce not only about then, but the ownership of the Vancouver Canucks and sort of the current Canucks roster and sort of what he sees. I encourage you, if you don't already subscribe to the Area 51 podcast, to at very least give this episode a listen. I am jealous that they got Arthur on. I would love to talk to Arthur.
I've met him. He's a lovely gentleman.
Yeah, and I can't speak to have met him, but by all accounts that I've heard, real nice guy.
Yeah.
Real smart, real intelligent, down to earth. Like, it's like you always like the one that got away. When people were to consider sort of ownership, I might have been too young to know if people were not happy when the Griffiths owned the team. But all I remember is people like Mrs. Griffiths, his mother, she would be up like in like a press box or owner's box or a suite, and she'd be cheering, like fist pumping in the air if the Vancouver Canucks did well. And people were like, that's my mom. Like everyone thought of her that way, right? I can't say the same for like John McCaw and Francesco. Like, to Francesco's credit, he is fully invested as a fan of this team.
Maybe too invested.
Maybe. Whereas like, I think people really loved Arthur and his commitment and the family's commitment to Vancouver.
Yeah, I mean, great guy. I'm excited to listen to that episode. I have it lined up. Yeah, fascinating. Definitely showing it's 25 years, Rogers, but
it is.
Could do with a lick of paint, some new seats.
New seats.
New stats.
Don't do. Yeah,
But
when it was built, it was top of the line. But 25 years later, yeah, you're right. It needs an upgrade. I just don't know if we'll see that upgrade anytime soon. It's just a tough time.
Yeah. I mean, it's ideal time in terms of logistics, but in terms of actual financials, not so much.
And speaking of tough times, the Vancouver Canucks, I had heard, had furloughed like 25% of their staff, and this was during the playoffs. Well, Derek Jory, who many of you might know as the guy behind a lot of the Canucks social, behind a lot of the sort of in-house media, well, he was informed that he was being laid off. After, I want to say it was like 11 seasons.
He's been there a long time. I think, my entire time of being a Canucks fan, and like as a fan, like following via Twitter from a long way away, who's a huge part of it. Yeah,
and I only known Derek sort of in that role. Like I would imagine that my involvement with Vancouver Canucks and social media probably coincided either shortly after or within a year of him joining the team. Mm-hmm. And so that's how I sort of known Derek.
Do you remember the Canucks in-game account they used to have?
Yeah, Canucks game.
Yeah, that was great.
And then I mean, I could tell you stories about Van Canucks and Canucks game and how this evolution occurred. Now, granted, I've never actually worked for the team, but I did have sort of this inside look because of how they introduced themselves to social in the first few years. But I hope Derek comes back. Like I truly think that this was resulted of how finances are tight in the pandemic. This isn't something that's restricted to just the Vancouver Canucks. A lot of other NHL teams have made similarly tough decisions.
But yes, I think it's no secret that they're downscaling.
Yeah.
There.
So my hope is if you know of anyone else that works for a team, reach out, give them support if need be. I hope things turn around. I truly hope that most, if not all, can find their way back, and if not, at least find a means to land on their feet. Really good people are being impacted by a situation that is well outside of their control, and that goes well beyond the Vancouver Canucks. I mean, I'm sure some of you listeners have impacted the same. I do hope that we eventually find a way to turn things around and get back to at least a relatively similar version of what we used to know as normal. So here we are at the end of a lengthy episode. Our Monday episode was long. This one is almost as. Yeah. We've talked about all the same topics. We inserted a few additional ones that were appropriate enough because, hey, it's not like we were going to go back in time and ignore what happened Tuesday and Wednesday of this week. I again apologize that we had those technical issues and you get the episode when you would normally expect it. But lessons have been learned.
Lessons have been learned, actually, so we know things. It was different. It was a different internet era than the previous one.
Well, the previous one, I think, was Matt's internet.
Yes. Let's
be honest. We've talked about it, I think, in some of our episodes, but Matt's internet, no good.
Yeah. It's not. So, yeah, different issue, but we have lived and laughed and learned.
Yeah. So hopefully if it were to be encountered again, we at least know how to avoid it in a way that doesn't require us to reconvene and then re-record. As far as the show is concerned, we are getting near to the end of a weird and wacky NHL season. As has been our previous practice, off seasons tend to be a lighter recording schedule. Years ago, we'd just see you later, and we'd show up every so often and eventually spin back up close to preseason. Last year was sort of the first season where we then reduced ourselves down to sort of a bi-weekly cadence. And I would imagine that's what we're going to do this year.
Yeah.
Now, when will that kick off? I don't know, because we don't really know how the NHL dates are going to work. I mean, we have obviously the draft, we have free agency. That's going to be keeping us busy. Once we have an idea of what the NHL preseason and next season will look like, we'll sort of be able to plan things out. This is also getting into what we would traditionally know as holiday seasons. And for those who've listened to us a long time, you know that we generally take holiday weeks off. So the next holiday that we will encounter is Canadian Thanksgiving. So there's one in October, the week of Remembrance Day in November, and then sort of over the Christmas holidays and New Year.
Yeah. But the Canadian Thanksgiving is currently the episode after the draft. So we'll have to figure it out. We'll keep you informed as we know more.
But rest assured, C4 is sticking around. And then one final note. Based on the feedback that we got from Sam joining us last episode, one, we know we're going to have to get her back.
Yeah.
You, our listeners, loved her and loved what she had to say. And I think Sam kind of wants to come back so we can talk about the topic that we sort of addressed briefly at the end of the episode, gatekeeping, and what it means as a fan to try to impose a gate on others. I think there's a conversation to be had, but it got me thinking of how we can sort of have conversations beyond maybe the Vancouver Canucks or beyond hockey or beyond sort of the here and the now. And based on that, I've got a few irons in the fire to maybe bring in some guests that you might otherwise not expect us to have on, but we're going to talk hockey, or we're going to talk Canucks. We're going to talk about a topic that would be appropriate to C4 listeners. But you might be like, oh, that's an interesting, person to have on, or a couple of people. So again, stay tuned. You'll be the first to know if you listen to our episodes regularly. If you happen to be in Discord at Gate 16, you'll see it there too. If you're not already in Discord, discord.io/C4Discord. Join. You get to take part in all the conversation. It is the safest place to be as a Canucks fan. Like, Canucks Twitter can get crazy. Canucks Reddit can get crazy. Canucks.com forums can get crazy. C4 Discord, no crazy. There are still people who have opposing opinions and opposing
all
points.
the time.
But it is respectful. And if at any point it gets edgy, we then sort of come in, hey, everyone settle down, and we all sort of laugh about it and move on. So please, take part in that conversation. Join us. Let's have ourselves a good time. So as we look to wrap things up, what final words of wisdom do you have for all of our C4 listeners there, Anna?
Go Tampa. I hope Kucherov scores all the goals, because he is my only player left standing in my fancy pool with Friends of the Show broadcast. So, yeah, I just need Tampa to win all the games and Kucherov score all the remaining goals, and I'll be happy.
Speaking of broadcasts and fantasy pools, I'm in their football pick'em, and I believe I'm top 25 right now.
Go you.
Let's be honest. I know very little about NFL football. I just sort of go through and look at the team names. I think they're good. And last week, that did me very well. Week 1 didn't do me so well.
Oh, well.
But we'll see how that goes. But as far as final words, everyone, just stay safe. We are getting into what we would traditionally know as cold and flu season. Specifically for us here in the province of British Columbia, throughout Canada, across the United States, we're seeing infection rates go up. And I think that has to do with sort of some maybe pandemic tiredness where we're wanting to get out and be social again, but also the summer. So maybe it's time for us to do what we can to withdraw a little bit.
Hunker down.
Get a handle on things, because I would hate for anyone here at C4 to find themselves or someone they know ill and potentially in a tough spot. So please, stay safe. But on behalf of the still away Matley at Matley_61, the Unfit to Podcast, Adam Nolan Carter at Adam FOC, Anna Forsyth at A4Forsyth03, and myself, Chris Golden at Light Force. I'm going to sign this episode off with those magical words. We out.